Hi guys, it's me again. I just wanted to go backwards a little bit and talk to you about something we haven't really talked about yet, and that is what is a young adult novel? What is a YA piece of fiction? Um, in a nutshell, a YA piece of fiction is a novel or a story that's written for young adults. Well, that's pretty obvious, but Um, what I mean by that is that generally we have a young adult protagonist, right? Now, having written and published some young adult books, I can tell you that the way it works in publishing is that the assumption is that kids, young adults want to read up. What do I mean by that? I mean that um, a 15-year-old doesn't want to read a novel with a 15-year-old protagonist. A 15-year-old wants to read a novel with a 17-year-old protagonist. Likewise, a 13-year-old wants to read a novel with a 15-year-old protagonist, right? Um, so you always, the assumption is that kids always want to read up. They want to read about, the cool kids who are a year or two older. Um, probably not want to read about, they probably do not want to read about somebody their age, and certainly they don't want to read about somebody younger. When you were in high school and you were 16, you certainly didn't want to hang around with the 14-year-old kids, right? The middle school kids. So, but that's the first thing, is that we have a young adult protagonist. And then I would say the second thing is that we have young adult themes, um, concerns, right? What are themes? Well, themes are just sort of what the novel concerns itself with. So, what kinds of issues concern young adults? And I don't mean, political issues or societal issues or something like that. More like personal issues. So, personally, on a personal level, kids that age are concerned with just growing up, um, finding their own voice, finding their own identity, right? Love, romance, sex, dealing with parents or other authority figures, um, how to become, how to navigate your way toward adulthood. So I would say, we're going to see that in almost every novel we read this semester, that they share those themes because those are the themes that are important to young adults. All right, so having said that, let me give you a little bit of background here. For a long time, um, we didn't have literature, we didn't have novels for young adults. We talked about this last time. Before we could have literature for teenagers, we had to have teenagers. So we had that, a whole idea of, I talked about last time, about sort of the invention of the teenager because of the car gave them the freedom to be their own social class. So that had to happen first. But then you've got to think about, once these books started being written and they were identified, yeah, that is a group. Yes, they are their own social class. Let's have some novels for them. But these novels would be written by adults who were seeing, let's put it this way, they weren't seeing teenagers realistically. They were seeing them the way they wanted to see them. So I'm going to turn my camera around for a second here and give you a couple of examples. Um, let's see here. Well, my camera doesn't want to turn around. Let me just hold these up for you. Um, if you can see this right here, it's probably backwards, but this was a typical book for teenagers back in the 1940s. It's called First Date Stories, right? Here's another one that was typical for back then. Um, Cherry Ames, Veteran Nurse. So, there were there were a whole lot of books like this about, you know they were almost always the same young women who were nice, smiling, had no problems in the world, just wanted to be a good kid and just wanted to grow up to be a good wife. And maybe if they were going to have a job when they were get older, it might be a nurse, as we just saw, or a librarian or something like that. Um, the books with male protagonists, it was always about, Johnny Ace football star. And, these were kids who were just winners and they were happy and they were clean cut and they did not think about anything like, premarital sex or anything bad like that. They didn't drink, they didn't swear, they didn't do anything bad, right? So, in other words, these novels were sort of written by adults, um, hoping that this was how their kids were, thinking or wishing that this is how their kids were. No problems, no concerns, clean living, growing up perfectly. So, not realistic, right? Um, People when they're teenagers have as much problems or as much interior difficulties, sadness, depression, worries, concerns as anybody else. But the writers of these books didn't want to recognize that. They just wanted to see perfect kids with perfect lives who were chaste and pure as the driven snow. So, what was the effect when Catcher in the Rye came along? I'll talk about that in the next video. All right.